As the years have progressed, even though cumulative enrollment across the state has reduced, you can see that chronic absenteeism rates have continued to climb. We need to figure out what that means. So we need to do more, especially in the light of the time when chronic absenteeism wasn't tracked. So that's, March 2020 through June of 2021.
I'm going to ask, I guess, a rhetorical question in terms of where do you spend your time, money, and resources? Some of the research from University of Chicago, one of the things that we've seen, and we've heard this in a number of places, is that attendance is the #1 predictor of dropout and graduation rate. So as we talk today about data, then I think it's the question of where do you spend your time, money, and resources? Go ahead and click through. Because here's what University of Chicago found as it relates to course failure for students. 5% is attributable to test scores, 7% to demographics, and yet 67% of course failure is directly attributable to attendance. And when I think of where we spend our time, money, and resources, is it on this indicator? It's the #1 predictor of graduation rates. And we have all kinds of money that we have designated towards test scores, how much money we spend on reading specialists. It's not to say that those things aren't important, but I think this might be a good exercise to do with some of your colleagues when you go back to your district to really kind of maybe reframe how they think about attendance, because attendance really is central to everything. It's the only indicator that impacts every department of school operations, from staffing, funding, transportation, nutrition. All of it depends on how many kids show up that day to school. This year's third graders, right? School starts for many districts in the next couple of weeks, have never experienced what you and I would classify a normal or traditional school year. And so what you see in this table in the center is on the left-hand side, what grade the student's currently in for this school year, and the last time they had that traditional or normal school experience. You have this sort of bubble, if you will, in terms of the legacy and impact that lost learning has had these last several years. And just as easily as a habit been broken, we have to double down. It's going to be harder to reset the habits. Absolutely, we recommend a proactive and prescriptive, not a punitive approach. And I know that in the past, sometimes communications have felt negative or punitive, et cetera. So really looking at those things. And plans, because of COVID and the impact of COVID right now with the current surge, it's really important to make sure that what you are doing now and in the opening months of school, which are going to be so critical, what research has shown in the past is that students who are chronically absent the first month of school tend to be chronically absent throughout the year. So a strong start is really important. And so having a plan that's not solely reliant on hiring, because we're all fighting for the same candidates. And there just really aren't enough to go around, but literally looking at your systems. This is an opportunity to reassess, recalibrate. Just as we talked about resetting habits for students, this is the time to ask yourselves, what are we doing and why are we doing it? Does it make sense? We really have to inspect what we expect. And so how often are you looking at your data? And some other questions you should hopefully are asking yourself is, are you the first to know or the last to know when there's a problem? And that's really important too. And so I'm going to be sharing some analysis that I do quarterly report to the California Department of Ed at their quarterly state SARB meeting, School Attendance Review Board meeting. And it's data that we collect through the work that we do with districts throughout the state on a program called the Achievement Initiative. And the Achievement Initiative is our attendance management system. So it plugs into districts that we partner with into their SIS and pulls that data and does a lot of the analysis and trend analysis that I'm going to be sharing with you.
Well, I do want to just say and just remind people then, I think you've already said it, but like what you're going to share is a sample of the districts you're working with across the state. Mm-hmm. And we can really then compare them to California overall, right? Because it's just a sample. It's like a sample section, subsection, and then your comparison data, which is awesome. So thank you for this.
Oh, absolutely. So this data set will be around 330,000 kiddos. It's 17 different counties from north to south across California. So it is truly that, a sample. And this isn't shocking to anybody. This has been all over the news. And this is a national What we've seen this has been an ongoing statewide trend in terms of declining enrollment. But what we have seen due to the pandemic is the acceleration in the decline of enrollment across California. And so this is the point in time for the last 3 years, looking at the end of June 2020, 2021, and then June of 2022. And so we've seen a 0.07 decline of about 2,200 kids this year over this time last year. And so this number just continues to drop. And again, anecdotally shared that we're already hearing from districts that their enrollment that they're seeing right now in terms of actuals is going to look lower for this school year as well. This allows us just to start, again, peeling back the layers of the onion. So we've seen that sort of that larger aggregate of the 330,000 students. But then let's look at the size of the district and in general what we'll see. I want to just walk you through this because the tables that I'm going to show after this follow a similar pattern, which is looking at year over year in June of 2020 chronic absence rate, June of 2021 versus June of 2022. Then you'll see that rate of increase versus the non-partner rate of increase and the difference there. And so that's what we're seeing here. But this is looking at the size of the district or enrollment. And what we see is roughly around 3,500 to 5,000 enrollment has the highest, followed by our districts that what we would call mid-size, 10,000 to 20,000 students. And then where everyone else falls behind it, about 10% behind. And then what we've also seen is looking at district types. So we do have our K-12 districts on, but in California, we have elementary school districts as well as high school districts. And actually for the 2 years preceding this last school year, what we saw is that high school districts on average had the highest chronic absentee rates, and that changed this year. And we saw elementary school districts actually outpacing high school districts and unified districts in terms of the highest overall chronic absence rate. And then when we look at growth rate in comparison, we see unified school districts probably in terms of the fact that they have both elementary school students as well. So they're not that far behind our elementary districts in terms of their overall increase or growth rate in chronic absenteeism. I want to put these last couple of slides that we've seen together. We saw this decline in enrollment, and then we've seen this growth in chronic absenteeism. And so that's what this is really showing. It's showing the growth rate in chronic absenteeism and the growth rate or decline, in this case, the rate of decline in enrollment by grade level. And so it's a bit of a double whammy, unfortunately, that we're not only having fewer students show up, but then those that are enrolled aren't coming. And we see that here in the data. The impact of the pandemic, and as we look at this data, many of us on this call, we talk the language, we talk about chronic percentages, we talk about ADA, and that is really meaningful to us. It's really important though, it's going to take everybody from the driver that child first sees when they're getting on the bus to school, to our teaching staff, the curriculum and instruction side of the house, to understand everyone has to have skin in the game. And this is another way to visualize the data and communicate with all stakeholders, maybe in a way that is more accessible to them, because they don't live in our world where we talk so much of ADA and the child welfare and attendance world. So this is looking at missed learning time by grade level. I just took a standard. I did not account for grade level instructional minutes variations. So this is to give us an estimate of the total missed hours of learning time. And what we see is when we take those grade level chronic absence rates and use a 6-hour day as a multiplier, it's 17.56 million hours of lost instructional time, which we did the math on is 2.9 million days and $121 million of average daily attendance using $42 as a general multiplier. So I think we can connect the dots because we're going to need all stakeholders. So whatever that language is, whether it's the dollars and cents, the instructional time, this is another way to visualize the data, but also to recognize that we're not going to solve this overnight. We cannot make one great summer school session won't make up for this much missed learning time. It's going to take a long-term investment to really kind of right the ship, if you will. And when we look at our other student groups, this is looking at the top 5 ethnicities by year. And what we see here is, while this is the top 5 enrollment, So these are the 5 largest ethnicities that we serve in the data set. But this chart on the left is actually ranked from high to low, highest chronic absence rates, and that's experienced by our Black students, followed by our Hispanic and Latino students, and on down we see. So what's represented on the right then is showing the relative position. And what this shows is that one ethnicity over another has not exceeded their position, if you will, in terms of their overall chronic absence rate. We've just seen exponential growth across the board. And that pre-pandemic, our African American and Black students had the highest chronically absent rates, et cetera. And so this is really where we talk about this from the place of equity, that looking at our data, this is really showing that we have work to do, and that we need to be able to get behind the why for certain student groups as to why they're not coming to school.